Okay, ready.
Hold on. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Not Us podcast, hosted by two sisters, myself, Angela, and my really hot sister, Samantha, as we talk about change and choice, and we celebrate all those messy bits in between.
We're not doctors, therapists, gurus, or witches. The stories and opinions expressed in this episode are our own for entertainment only and subjected to change. Swearing is likely, and please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Welcome to today's episode. And just to state the obvious, we did not coordinate our looks today.
We did
Just
not.
in case anyone is interested, we did not coordinate at all.
We may as well get a sister wardrobe, though. Like, it wouldn't be terrible if we were that dynamic podcast duo that dress the same.
That's it. Twinsing.
Crimson.
Okay. Maybe just to start, if you don't mind me taking it away a little
Go
bit.
for it.
Our podcast is about change, choice, and the messy in-betweens. And we often speak about change, whether that is change by our own choice or change by the world or the universe or God or whatever it is that you believe, bringing change into our life. But last week, we decided that we wanted to do an episode on choice because recently our own viewpoints on choice were challenged a little.
So, just a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine in South Africa created quite a lot of question and invitation to think about where our own autonomy starts and ends, and when do we intervene in someone else's choices and who gets to make those choices. To be a little bit more specific, his choice was about ending his life, taking people on the journey of that, just looking at the Facebook posts, just even within our friendship circle and my industry as a performance industry, just really watching people divided on whether this should have been allowed. But I think for me, it was interesting because I am quite pro people choosing for themselves. And if you are choosing to end your life, I'm pretty much like, well, you're a sentient being and that's your choice. But this one threw me as well because it's someone who was healthy, 60, and just choosing to not want to get old. And at the same time, both Sam and I have got friends who are really fighting for their lives, who are facing their own mortality. And also, just this week, we've had Mel from MAFS, which is one of our guilty pleasures, MAFS Australia and MAFS UK, coming to the end of her cancer journey at 54, passing away. So in my mind, it's like, yes, you get to choose, but in the same breath, there are people who are dying to live. Like they will do anything for an extra breath of life. And where is that fairness in between? So Sam and I don't necessarily have the answers on this one. We have points of view that we're keen to hear your thoughts and be challenged on our points of view. And we, in fact, probably differ in some of our thoughts on freedom and choice as well. But that's where the topic stemmed from.
Well, I think not only did it impact you who knew the person, but it really challenged my own viewpoint of choice. And I actually felt really angry. And it's probably because we have close friends that are going through health journeys and really are working and making just the hardest decisions in ensuring that they'll be here for the long run. And so, even in having the conversation with you around it, how do you express something that you feel quite strongly about to someone who, this is actually someone that you knew? Because it's quite easy to make a statement or raise your points of view when it's a neutral person or someone that we don't know. Then we can be quite bold in our conversation. But when it's someone that is known, well, at least for me, I want to be respectful of relationships. But in this situation, when someone chooses to unalive themselves, I often feel really bad for those that are left behind, especially if there's no answer.
Mm-hmm.
But he had made the choice to take people on the journey. And I would love to say, well, that's so noble. But then at the same point, I'm like, no, actually, I don't see any bravery in that choice. And then I'm also someone who believes that it's your body, you get to choose. But this one hit differently. And I think maybe it's just the time, like where I'm at in my life, seeing friends on a journey to stay alive. And so it brought up a number of questions of, where does our individual choice start and end? For me, what do I consider right and wrong in terms of another person's choice? Who am I to say someone else's choice is right or wrong? It's just my point of view. And then who gives me the right to have that point of view? If I say we speak about change is constant, choice is the variable. So I suppose that's what we want to take into this conversation today, is not to have the answers, but rather just to stir up some thinking, and also for us to have a conversation around what choice actually looks like, and where do we kind of sit in that line of you have no choice, you have complete choice.
Yeah. I mean, it's even a difficult conversation to really be eloquent about. So I don't think Sam and I are entirely sure where this conversation is going to go today. But I think one of the things that came up for me is that with this friend of mine's choice, it started when he was doing the posts while he was still alive. I was very much like, that's really interesting. You're kind of fascinated and you're understanding. Then suddenly they do the choice. You still have all the shock. You have the sadness that goes with it. But then it's almost like you get confused. When someone chooses to unalive themselves, it's so confusing. So you can't just deal with the sadness. You're dealing with all the other emotions. And I think that is absolutely okay. As I watched my friends dealing with this quite publicly on social media, to go, right now, it's okay to be curious. Actually, it's okay to be angry, and because you're going through the stages of grief at the same time. I think where it becomes tricky for me is when you start putting your choices out for the rest of the world, there's a massive responsibility that comes with that. Not everyone is mature enough to look at this and analyze it. And someone might just be like, I'm having a really bad time in my life, and actually I want an out. And if that person can do it, I can do it. And that's when it can make people really angry.
Yeah, the one thing that came up for me in terms of this particular act was choice is not universal. When someone chooses this choice, when they're fully healthy, relatively young, in the prime of their life, then it becomes harder to have compassion and understanding, because I think about the people you leave behind. Your individual choice needs to sit within the contracts that you have with other people. And so do you get to make a choice only for yourself when you have living contracts that you're engaged with? I think there's a hierarchy in terms of where the personal choice actually sits. And within that, I think you have the right to choose what's right and wrong for you. But I don't think it's universal. And then, of course, on the other side of that, I have very different views. So it becomes interesting. If we say that people should have agency over their life, what does that mean? And are you able to stand by that when it's uncomfortable, when it challenges you? I don't know if I'm such an advocate for choice in these situations.
You know, I think that it has become harder in the times that we live because we are exposed to so many more empathetic ways of thinking. Years ago, when the rules and regulations of how we should live were really black and white, whether that was the church, the government, your doctors, everyone made choices for us. So if the church said, ending your life by your own hand means you're going straight to hell, that was really clear for you. And therefore, that's how you bring up your children, and that's how you view everything. But nowadays, we have all of these choices, and we are asked to consider these things. We're asked to consider people's reasons that bring them to that place. And that can often leave us feeling super confused and shaken by these choices. I have a long history of having people who I know really well choose to end their lives. And for all of those, I've had very different emotions. I remember one of the very first ones when I was about 18, and that was around sexuality. growing up in a faith-based environment where that was a sin. And that was one of my closest friends, and never spoke to me about it, even though I was in the arts and, for all intents and purposes, open-minded. And I arrived at church one day and found out that he had ended his life. And that was really hard to grapple with. But as it's gone along, I think somewhere I've become numb to it. I'm like, okay, well, that was their choice. That was their choice. But with this one, it was a bit more like, you've taken us on a long journey, and now you've pulled us into your choice. Do we get the right to question and ask and actually say, no, that choice had a ripple effect?
Well, that's the other side of the coin. If we have so much more freedom to choose for ourselves, the other side of the coin could be we also then expose ourselves to judgments and other people's points of views. People are not under obligation to share their choice or journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it goes beyond choosing. It's the same as our pets when they're suffering and they're really ill and we're keeping them alive, essentially. We make the choice to euthanize them and be kind, that act of kindness to help them to transition out of their bodies. But when people decide to move to another city or another country and they are afraid to leave their animals behind because they don't know what care they're going to be given or it's not convenient, then they make the choice to end their lives as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I have strong feelings about it as well.
It's when my judgment pikes again.
And there we go. The judgment barometer is off the charts. But the point is, it's like, depending on who you are, where you are, how you justify it, what is the boundary of making that right? Who gets to say what's right and wrong?
Yeah.
And how do you put that into law, and how do you action that in society? Because we know, and something you said, which was really powerful, is that the same people like this, the person we're speaking about, in their mind, they are instigating for change and to allow people to have more choice in this area. If you think of people that live in countries where women have no rights, they can't go to school, they can't drive a car, without the disruptors, without those ones who step out of actually you saying, I'm not allowed to do this.
Yeah.
But I'm absolutely doing this because this disruption and massive statements, big, bold statements, are what change laws, society, and the way we see things. So when is it okay to be the disruptor and when is it not?
Yeah. So we look at this particular example and we go, what an absolute selfish act. But then if you look at young women that have stood up against oppression in the countries that they're grown up in, where they are fighting for education or they're fighting to learn how to drive, and we see these acts of rebellion as heroic, and what they eventually lead to is change within society. So what's coming to the surface for me is that the other side of the coin in terms of choice is judgment. And it's been okay to know that there's going to be judgment in terms of the choice, but still making those choices. Whether you and I are sitting here going, it's right, or we agree with it, makes no difference because we actually have no skin in the game. It's their life, their choice. We can have a viewpoint on it. We can be incredibly judgmental about the choice that they made, but that's as much of the energy exchange as we're going to provide to that situation. But when do these disruptors, this individual acts of disruption or rebellion, when does it have a ripple effect and start to impact on a broader scale? And I suppose that's what it is. It's when it has a positive impact or when it could potentially have a negative impact on other people's lives.
Yeah, I think it's cause and effect. So if you're choosing for yourself it's impacting your life, it's not harming anyone else, then there's one set of feelings we can associate with it. When it starts impacting our lives or causing harm to another, and people don't have choice, then we really do need guardrails in place. But I think what comes up for me quite clearly as you are speaking, sis, is what does someone else's choice bring up in us? So even in all of this, why is this particular one causing me to go into judgment or panic? Or what is it that it brings up in me? But when it's something like this, it's so confronting. What is it in me that is responding to this? When judgment rears its head in such a strong way, what is that reflecting in me that I need to look at? And I think it very often just brings us back to ourselves and to go inwards and say, okay, for me in this one, is it that I have had life-threatening diagnoses before and it's tinkering on that? Is there still some residue around that? The fear of not having a choice for my own life? And what is it that that's bringing up? And I think once we do that and we go, okay, I see that, then the sting is often not as big on the other person's choice. Life reflects to us what's going on within us, particularly when it comes to these very primal to live or not to live and what that brings up in us.
Yeah, I suppose that's the ultimate, right? It's life and death. And I guess that for me, there's a real sadness, a deep sadness for anyone that feels that life is not worth living. And we can all have moments where things just feel like too much in the moment. But when you can make a choice that the world would be better without you there, and those that love you and care about you would be better without you there, maybe I'm just a little too selfish or delusional, but I do not think that the people that I love and the people that love me would be better off without me in it. So it does not matter how bad my days are. I don't think I could ever do that to them.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where the selfishness is. It's that they've got to continue to live without you in their life. And those are the birthdays, the special moments, even the aging, sitting here going, God, I need more Botox. One can see who needs Botox,
Yeah.
Those are the moments that the people that you leave behind have to carry on experiencing without you in it. And when I look at my friends who are fighting to live, and shout out to each one of them because I'm so incredibly proud of them on this journey. And thank you for including us on the journey, even if it's just sending you love. Like, I look forward to the moments that we have together, even if it's just a WhatsApp call or a quick check-in. I know that my life would be less full without them in it. So I would never be able to do that to the people that I love. And it's not judgment. I think I have great sadness for people that feel differently.
Yeah. I had a time in my life that I was extremely heartbroken, and I was having every 4 monthly checkups with my gynecologist. This was after chemo and radiation. And my heart was really, really broken, and I couldn't find anything that I wanted to live for because all of my hopes and dreams had ended with this relationship that had ended. I remember going to my doctor, and she was doing her checkup and sitting on the table, and she said to me, everything looks really good. And I started crying, and she was like, what's the matter? And I said, there was a part of me that was hoping that my cancer would have come back so that I could not have treatment and just exit this world. Of course, she was like, let's attend to that. And if you need help, medication, someone to speak to. But the point is that I had all of that feeling of just complete nothing, but I didn't have the ability to choose that for myself. And so I can get when people are like that. But the flip side of that is just being able to express that to her showing some care and saying, let's get on top of this. Sometimes it can just be a chemical imbalance. It can be as simple and complicated as that. But that opened up some space to relieve it. I think a lot of times people are sitting with these things so deeply that they can't find an escape. So the escape is, I'm just going to choose to end this. I just want out. I have a friend who was a first responder on a helpline, and she would say to me that when people called in, if you could get them just to talk to you and focus on you for like 40 seconds, you've got that window. And I'm not sure what the window period is, but that small window of whatever it is that they choose to do.
Yeah.
So it's when you're making choices for yourself that are so final, and you're not involving anyone else in those choices, that it becomes really tricky and expose yourself to such judgment.
And look, adulting is challenging, right? Sometimes we actually don't want to make a choice.
Wow.
Let the universe take its course and we can deal with the consequences thereof. And sis, I fully understand what it's like to have dark days. When I was coming off my medication, there was a lot of times where it felt like I was underwater and there was a pocket of air in the corner and needing just to get my mouth to there so I could breathe. But even in those moments, the thing that would get me through was my brother and my sisters and my mom and my loved ones. That's just not an act that I could ever, like, that's just not a betrayal. And I'm particularly loyal to contracts. It takes me a while to make a choice, but if I'm in, I'm like fully in.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've contracted in this life to be your sister, and therefore it would be an absolute betrayal of that contract.
You're damn right, and I would be coming across to drag you out of the ground and remind you of the contract.
Oh,
We just need a moment there. But yeah, moving a little alongside to another conversation, when a woman chooses for herself to keep a pregnancy or to end that pregnancy. And this becomes really debatable, and you and I, we veer off at some point in time. I do believe that this is my body. I get to choose what I do with my body. So I absolutely believe that we as women get to choose for our own bodies. But when it comes to women choosing for their bodies, and this is the one that you and I were just aware of our potentially different points of view on this, I do feel like, again, the cause and effect. So if I'm engaged sexually with a partner, there's a contract in there somewhere. And so if within that relationship, you still get to make the decision as a woman. But I feel like by very nature of that contract, the other person should have a say. And I know that this is a big thing because you might have a woman who absolutely doesn't want that, but the man wants the baby. So does she then have to carry the baby so that he can have the baby? Life is not black and white. It is impossible to really decide. But again, you have choice. What's the right choice? Who gets to say that what I feel is the right choice? Does the state get to say it? Does the church get to say it? Who gets to say it?
now, I often say I'm open to different views and opinions. And then there are times where I'm like, no, there's only one view and only one opinion. This is one of those times. I do not think, and I am pro-choice, I do not think that pro-choice is a avenue for I'm irresponsible and have fallen pregnant and I don't like the consequences. I think that avenue is there for situations that are not healthy, situations that you find yourself in, and this is the only option, or this is the better option. So I'm all for It's a woman's choice. It's her body. You use the example of a healthy situation. In a healthy situation, why wouldn't you want to keep the child?
Maybe the one partner's just not ready yet.
You shouldn't be participating without protection then. Come on, we're all adults. We understand the consequences.
There's that judgment.
There we go. That's when I'm black and white.
Sarah is to blame for many of these decisions.
I do not have time for idiots. If you are old enough to be in the act, you should have been informed. I was informed at the age of 12. I did not participate at the age of 12, but my mother sat me down and we had many conversations about being safe. So you should know what the consequences are. Now, we might have different views of what a healthy situation is, but for me, a healthy situation is two people who have spoken about what the consequences might be. And so you are either protecting yourself or you are not participating. This is where we differ. That's okay.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I'm just thinking of those rare occasions when I've not had a conversation with someone about the outcome of this irresponsible act might be. And I've just been laughing.
See, there is an element of conservatism in me.
You are actually way more conservative than me, I think.
And I'm quite central. So I do believe that people have to conduct themselves within the norms of society and express yourself within those constraints.
You see, and this is part of what we debated, though, because
100%.
we live in London and the Netherlands. You have choice. There's fair rules for everyone. What about societies where just because you want to kiss another man will get you killed? So it's like when you start functioning and trying to make choice within that environment, and you and I were saying, well, then you should, certainly when you're an adult, you should try and choose to live in a society that reflects your values and that supports how you choose to live. Of course, not everyone has the luxury of being able to do that.
It is also reflective in how you and I live our choices. We have touched on this previously. You've lived your choices quite loudly. I will live my choices in a way that this is my choice. Your opinion and your viewpoint is actually not welcome because I'm not enforcing my lifestyle or my choices on you. So my expectation, unless you want to see a really aggressive side of me, is mind your own business. So for many years, people didn't know that I was in gay relationships and they didn't know that I was gay from a professional perspective. And I remember confronting people in terms of, well, what's it got to do with you? Why are you asking? And if you're asking, why don't you come and ask me? Because I'm the source. Don't go around. And actually having these conversations with people that were a little bit older than me and had seen me growing up, and I don't care who you are. My choice, I live my life as I live my life without impacting other people. I think it's totally amazing when people choose different and choose to be louder and prouder. The challenge with that is that people are going to have a viewpoint and it might make people uncomfortable. I think that's what you've got to then anticipate and be open to debating or engaging.
Yeah. Just in terms of how do we make choices then for ourselves? Like, how do you make healthy choices? One of the things around that is to try and surround yourself with people who you can be really honest with, not necessarily yes people. We all want cheerleaders, and your girlfriends should be your cheerleaders, but you want to have people that you can have proper debate with. And we've said this so many times in our podcast that if you don't have anyone like that in your life, find a therapist or find someone, a local counselor, a person of faith, whoever it might be, that you can sometimes just speak to about choices that you are making to make sure that the choices you make are healthy choices for you. But that makes me wonder, how do you make choices, sis? Do you go with, does this feel light? Does this feel heavy? Do you have a pendulum that you swing? Do you make a list? Is ChatGPT your go-to? Like, how do you make choices for yourself? The hard ones and the easy ones.
Oh, all of the above. It does depend. Look, I'm a lot better at big choices. Don't ask me what I want to eat for dinner. That is the absolute hardest thing for me to decide. Like, are you
Yes.
joking? Um, yeah, I look at data depending on what the choice is. I'll always weigh up pros and cons. I might use a pendulum now and then, but that's normally about emotional stuff where I'm like just not tapping into my body properly. But I look at the potential outcome. I'm someone that thinks about the long-term impact. I am probably a little slower in making choices. I'm quick in terms of analyzing paths and what the options are. And I do not go into 5 or 10 options. I know someone who, between her and her boyfriend, we had 5 plans for Christmas last year. I won't mention any names. For me, it's 1 or 2. We don't need to overwhelm ourselves.
3's the lucky number. It's the sweet spot.
I'll run it by a couple of people, depending on who's impacted. But then it's a choice and it gets made, and we work towards it. Very black and white, very linear, very masculine. But I was thinking about it this morning. When I look at my career, I started off on the help desk, and that was about finding a solution to a problem. And I think it's one of the skills that I've taken into my life and into my career. And so finding solutions to problems are quite quick and easy for me. There is a process, and it's normally, where do you want to land? Where are we? And then how do we get there? I suppose that's actually really the approach. Where do we want to go? Where are we now? And what are the paths from here to there? And then selecting whichever path seems right. And sometimes, I have to phone a friend, discuss it at length. The emotional or the body stuff is a little bit more challenging for me, because really, don't ask me what I want to eat, because I have no idea.
I hope that Nathan is listening to this episode, because at breakfast, he's like, what do you want for tea? I'm like, I don't even know what I want for lunch. I don't even know what I want for this meal. And you're asking me to make a decision for tonight.
It would make me angry, actually. Be like, rather ask me to solve the Middle East crisis, but do not ask me what I want to eat.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Making decisions. I've gone through the full gambit. And, there's analysis paralysis, where you overanalyze something and then you just don't do anything because you've now analyzed it in an inch of its life. But like a really quick fire way, intrinsically somewhere within us, something generally feels light, or like it kind of kicks you and goes, okay, or it feels constricted and a little bit heavy. So even if I've made a mind decision, I always try and check in with my body and see if that's sitting comfortably, because our minds and our thinking can be our worst enemies as well as our best friends, but they can really sabotage us, especially when it comes to judging others and judging ourselves. So I just throw that in there as a pearl of wisdom.
We never judge. This is a judgment-free zone.
We never judge, particularly now. We are not in judgment of what's happening on MAFS Australia. And speaking of girls, and girls who call themselves girls and then are mean girls, we'd never be in judgment of that. We never call each other and swear them out over the phone.
Whatever you have to say about yourself, that's probably not what you are. So if you have to announce to the world that you're a girl's girl, you're probably not. Your actions will demonstrate that you're not. Anyway, we digress. I don't want to bring it back to the heavy topics, but what about bigger choices? So like, what was your approach in terms of moving countries? Was it the same light and what felt expansive? And
those are the micro choices. All your micro choices are what help you to make the bigger choices, because it's never like just one big decision. It's all the little ones, when, how, all of those little ones. So yeah, I use that as getting in the habit of, does this feel constricted or does this feel expansive for me? No matter what the decision is, I always check it in with my body first. But when it comes to choosing in general, I try and choose for something and not against something else. So when it goes to choosing country, I'm not leaving the country that I'm in primarily because of all of those obvious things that people moving out of South Africa were known for, but rather I'm choosing for in
Grey
this.
weather.
I didn't realize about the weather. But I was choosing for when I get to a certain age, does this society support me? Do I feel like there's more options and career options for me? Does it mean that the world is a bigger space? So I really do try and look at what it can create for me. But choosing to create is creating for something more, something that's more expansive. Does that make sense?
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. And I suppose that's where the pros and the cons can trip you up a little bit, because that's when you're very much going into your mind space and ignoring the body. So I like that. Thank you. I don't know how I'll implement it, but something to consider.
I think that both has its place. Like I think you
No,
should,
100%.
you know what I mean? So it's that. But I think when you get to start making final choices and choosing to expand your world, yeah, that's when you want to get out of your head a little bit more and sort of dream. Even in every choice, it's like you've called it, I like to see what the outcome is, but maybe there's also a place to be dreaming of what an outcome might look like. So it's arriving at a similar place, but it might just make the journey a lot more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very much that same approach in terms of where do you want to land and where you're currently now.
Yeah.
The pros and the cons should be a guideline and not the deciding factor. I think your decisioning approach is a little bit more expansive in terms of possibilities.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as one or the other. I just see it as maybe layering on your choice, especially for the big stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's really about expansion and exploring and looking at the data points, but not allowing them to bog you down into analysis paralysis or keep you from moving forward.
And the other thing to add is that if you're making a choice, however you choose to make that choice, and it's not sitting well with you, if something just feels uncomfortable, it might just not be the time to make that choice. We feel like I have to make this decision now. It's a black and white situation. Decide. If it doesn't sit well in your system, don't ever underestimate your gut. It might be that you need to make that decision in 10 minutes time and something would have shifted. So always just come back to your inner knowing. Get used to listening to that inner voice.
Yeah. The gut knows.
It's the other brain, right? That's right.
It is.
Okay.
Sis, we started this conversation from quite a heavy point of view. What else do you want to throw at this topic?
Perhaps it's to say that we are intrinsically quite selfish creatures as humans. And so we often get in real judgment about other people's decisions and choices. And we sometimes get really passionate about that, even if it's not actually affecting our lives on a daily basis. And we can be quite opinionated about that. And I think that's also part of when you make just choices for yourself. Know that they're not going to sit well with everybody. Life moves so fast and is so changing. So it's to really just kind of try and know that we can hold sadness, we can hold joy, we can still hold hope in the midst of all of these choices and decisions and change and judgment and everything that's happening. It's just to make sure that we always come back to ourselves, that we find a technique to ground ourselves and to be able to cope with our decisions, the ripple effect of our decisions, and that we are able to cope with the ripple effects of other people's decisions.
Just to answer that, I would say be kind. Be kind about how you voice your viewpoints, give feedback. There's always a choice on how you deliver something. And knowing that someone else is trying the best that they can with the information that they have available to them at the time of making a choice is key to being kind. And isn't there this great saying, like, we all think people are thinking about us, but no one actually is?
Yeah.
We are consumed by what's going on in our personal life, the things that we can control and the things that we can't control. So live your life. People are going to judge. Change is the constant and choice is the variable.
Yes. I love that. And just expanding our allowance for others and for ourselves. But above all, and I love that you said it, be kind. Amen, sister. Let's
Amen.
put a tequila on being kind.
The conversation is not about judgment about anyone else. It was really about how we were given an opportunity to look closer at our viewpoints in terms of choices. And sometimes it's quite easy to believe that any choice is fine until something comes your way and it forces you to really look at yourself and how you are responding to a choice. And that's the point of today's conversation. We don't have the answer. There's no right and wrong here. It's just about an opportunity to challenge your own viewpoint. And in terms of that, cheers. It's tequila time.
I don't know why I do it. I honestly don't.
Cheers. That was a bit harsh this week.
Why do we choose this?
Thank you for listening. Remember to email us on notaspodcast@gmail.com. We are on all of the socials, so Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And remember to listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and watch us on YouTube. Until next week.
Time.
With my tequila bottle, ridiculous.